Here we are again with Charles White, the president of the Heritage League, and we're at the museum on Green Street. And behind us is an amazing display of railroad artifacts. We always associate the depot downtown, Friends of the Depot. They do an amazing job. If you haven't been there, please go. But this is a really handy little awesome artifact collection. So Charles, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's behind us?
Okay, as you mentioned, most of our larger artifacts were moved over to the depot when it was renovated 8 years ago. But what we have here is a picture of the loop. It's more of an orientation to railroad. We have some of the lanterns, we have some of the china that was used in the dining cars, date nails. So it's more or less just a snapshot of what's featured in the Depot Museum.
Well, once you go to the depot, come over here and create a nice little platform for what's going on in the railroad world.
The depot tells the history of the railroad, which is what placed Tehachapi here in the first place, and we have the follow-up to that. We also have the preceding. We have a Native American gallery that's very interesting as well.
We'll take a look at that next.
Okay.
So we're now in the back half of the Historic Museum in the Milano Gallery. Generous donation from Mark and Jesse Milano in the city of Tehachapi and other donors. This is a beautiful addition to the museum. A lot of Kauai Sioux artifacts. I'm holding a little pedestal here. But Charles, why don't you tell us a little more about the gallery, the Milano Gallery here?
Okay, when we put together this gallery, there was a book being written by one of the elders and by an archaeologist, and we used the basis of that book. And we published the book, and a lot of the photos and the items in the gallery were pictured in that book. So we had the advice of not only the Native Americans, but an archaeologist on what we were doing here. And basically, it's laid out with several vignettes. We show something about the rock art of the area. Behind us here, we have photos from the Williams family showing their family going back to the 1800s.
And the baskets are crazy.
Right, the
cool.
case here on the right, all of these baskets belong to the Williams family. They're on loan. They know which of their relatives made them. They were made from about 1880 to 1920.
And they're not reproductions, they're real.
That's right. There are a lot of different types of mortar and pestles, such as the one Greg is holding here, because acorns was their main source of food. And they processed them, and they used the mortar and pestle to pound them into a powder that they could use for foodstuffs. We also have some archaeology items on display here, arrowheads from Sand Canyon that we know the provenance on. We know they came from there. And they show that there were Native Americans in this area 6,500 years ago. So we have put together this very informative gallery, and it's very attractive to see the baskets and other items that we consider art forms, but of course to the Native Americans they were items that they used in their everyday living.
Well, it's a beautiful gallery, and we'd like to thank Mark and Jesse Milano and the city of Tehachapi and the other donors. This is world class. Thank you, Charles.
Sure.
So when I was a kid, I remember this mammoth bone being found uncovered in Tehachapi. Very exciting. And the mammoth bone is now on display at the museum.
That's right. It was found in 1975 by two teenagers over near the railroad tracks. They, where there was an embankment, they saw part of it sticking out. They thought it was a skull, and they called the police. It turned out to be the end of the femur of a mammoth. And we've had a paleontologist look at this. He says that from the size, it came from a juvenile who was probably about 16 feet tall. The adults grow to be 25. So we had large mammoths as well as three-toed horses and prehistoric camels in this area. We have other fossils here, shells. We also have insects. In the adjoining cases, we have animals that have been taxidermied to show some of the animals and birds that live in the area.
Well, if you ever want to know what a mammoth bone looks like, come to the museum and check it out. It's ginormous. Well, here we are wrapping up our tour at the Heritage League Museum on Green Street, and I'm with Charles, obviously, still. Thank you for the guided tour. It's been an amazing time for for Key and I behind the camera. But Charles, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the architecture and the building and what it's been used for over the last many years?
Yeah, the building was built in 1931. It's an Art Deco type architecture. It's very unique. It was one of the few solid cement buildings that was not damaged in the earthquake in 1952. And you'll see the striking architecture, particularly one side there's a plaque that says courage, one side says truth, and then the pilasters here. So it's a beautiful example of Art Deco architecture. And it was built, as I said, in 1931 by the Kern County Library System, and it was a Tehachapi branch. When they moved out, about 1981, it was given to the city for public use, and the city allows the museum to use it, so we don't have to pay rent. So the city supports us that way. We don't get any other public funding. Everything is done by donations and by attendance and fundraisers. So we plan to continue with our mission statement of protecting the history and culture of the Tehachapi area, and that includes not only the Native Americans, but trying to stay up to date with what's happening today.
Well, thank you very much, Charles, for all the work, all
Sure.
the volunteer, and everybody behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.